In viral news, the American census has categorized Hmong people as East Asian, but a lot of Hmong Americans disagree with that. Let's delve into this.
Yeah, let's run the clip.
Hmong call for racial reclassification in the U.S. Census. For the first time in 27 years, the U.S. government updated its categorization of race and ethnicity in March to more accurately reflect the population. While this recategorization has been widely celebrated in the AANHPI community, it has also created tension among excluded groups like the Hmong. The U.S. Census Bureau categorized Hmong as East Asian after the 2020 census. This change itself has been criticized since the group was persecuted in China as an ethnic minority before they mostly migrated to Southeast Asian countries. As a result, many Hmong feel that they should be reclassified as Southeast Asian. The East Asian classification also raises concerns about hiding socioeconomic disparities between Hmong and other Asian households. Hmong households have a per capita income of $26,000, according to the 2020 American Community Survey, and other Asian households have a per capita income of $53,000. By classifying Hmong as East Asians, many are concerned that the socioeconomic disparity will be dismissed and overlooked. The Census Bureau is reportedly working with the Hmong community to improve their classification.
Hmong people live in the mountains of Southeast Asia. Their culture is very different from others and has been around for hundreds of years. The Hmong came from China and traveled through mountains, forests, and rivers on a fantastic trip that shaped their culture, language, and way of life, such as their past, traditions, and art, and how hard it is for them to keep their identity in a world that is changing so quickly. The Hmong have roots in old China, where they lived in the mountainous southern China for thousands of years. However, the Hmong were persecuted and there was political instability, so large groups of them left and settled in places like Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, and Myanmar in Southeast Asia. People from the Hmong tribe now live in Western countries like the US, France, and Australia.
Boom! Listen, people are talking about this on the internet, on Reddit. Groups urge census to reclassify Hmong people as Southeast Asian, not East Asian. And we are going to talk about why the government got confused, what can be done to change it. Because, Andrew, guess what? The census was taken in 2020. The next one's not till 2030. People want to change it, but the U.S. government's like, guys, our bad. But I don't know if I can really shift it in the middle.
Right. All right. So, guys, we got a lot to cover. So please hit that like button. Check out other episodes of the Hot Pot Boys. Hit the super thanks if you enjoy these videos. Basically, so long story short, I'm just going to give you my answer and my opinion. I think that Hmong Americans should be classified as Southeast Asian if the majority of them identify as that. That makes sense. And obviously, knowing Hmong people, it is close. It feels close to Southeast Asian culture and the experience in America, correct?
Right, for sure. So,
but David, the U.S. Census, we just want to talk about why the U.S. Census classified them as East Asian.
Right. Basically, they said, based on a stakeholder feedback and guided by the original people's language and the standards set by the U.S. Office of Management and Budget in 1997, we categorized Hmong people. For the very first time, they even had a Hmong category in the East Asian zone. They base it because Hmong is considered a Sino-Tibetan language historically.
So you're saying they're basing it more on the language family?
Yeah. So basically, they didn't consult a lot of people. I could see how the U.S. government got it mixed up, and now they're kind of like, yeah, our bad. We'll change it for 2030, but I don't know if I could change it right now. But CRAC has said that ultimately the East Asian classification is incongruous with the history and identity of Hmong Americans. So this is what a Southeast Asian activist group has said. Right.
And I mean, just a quick ancient history. The reason why also the Hmong language is considered a Sino-Tibetan language, meaning that it's kind of, what does Sino-Tibetan mean?
It's just a language family that includes like most Chinese or Han Chinese languages as well as Tibetan.
Right. Not saying Hmong is a Chinese language, by the way. But what I mean is that Hmong people, from ancient times, thousands of years ago, were from central or northern China, right? But over time, and most recently in the past couple hundred years, they got pushed down south to southern China, and then because
no, they were in southern China for 1,000 years.
Right, sorry. They were in southern China for a long time.
They were probably from Mongolia 3,000 years ago.
Right. And then most recently, last couple hundred years, they migrated to Southeast Asian countries to preserve their culture, and they're most recently have been in Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. So,
anywhere from like 150 to like 500 years, right?
And there are some Hmong people, aka Miao people in China is what they call them, ethnically Hmong people that are in China still.
Right
in the Yunnan region, but they are considered an ethnic minority.
By the way, though, I did do some research, Andrew. The one city that has the largest Hmong population in Laos is called Luang Prabang, and that's where you can get all the deep cut Hmong foods.
Right. Now, I'm going to go into the reasons of why Hmong people in America don't identify as East Asian, and there's multiple reasons for this. But first, I want to play some David Yang, who is a Hmong artist in Minnesota, because he has some really cool songs out.
Boom! I mean, yo, honestly, I think the Hmong language sounds pretty nice, and I got to tell you, David Yang is underrated. I mean, I know I don't think he does as much English songs anymore, but that man is a beast.
Anyways, guys, point number one, and we're just going to go through these quickly because I think it kind of makes sense to people where, like, most parents and families that are Hmong in America are from Southeast Asian countries, and they've been there for some time, at least multiple generations.
Right, you're referring to Laos, number one, I believe Vietnam, Thailand, but the Hmong diaspora around Southeast Asia is sprinkled everywhere.
Right, yeah, and you can see it from these maps and stuff. And also culturally, I think kind of even food-wise and just culture-wise, they just kind of more identify with the Southeast Asian community. Obviously, most Hmong people that I know, they grew up around other Southeast Asians as well.
Well, it was the refugee experience post all the wars in Indochina, right?
Yeah, I think some Hmong people fought on the side of the Americans in the Vietnam War.
Do you think that the U.S. government should have consulted them more, considering that the reason a lot of Hmong people were able to come to America was because they went on the side of the U.S. in multiple wars?
Yeah,
that would mean you should have asked somebody.
Yeah, I think you should have asked some of the community leaders, I guess. Point number two, obviously, Hmong people historically, they did get pushed down by Han Chinese people at the time, and so of course that's in their history, and a lot of Hmong people know that, so it's kind of like, well, if the Han Chinese pushed us out, then why identify with that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there was a lot of movement in ancient times in a lot of ways, and who knows? Maybe I don't know if the Mongolians pushed them out of the steppes into southern China,
Right. I would say even Hmong people in China, which are the Miao people, as we mentioned, they are considered a minority group in China. So if you're Hmong from China, though, maybe those Hmongs from China might identify nationality-wise as Chinese, but the Hmongs who made it to America that are from Southeast Asia, they're more removed from China.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they would have an optionality, and I don't think that these categories of East Asian, Southeast Asian, these are just American categories. Right. They don't fully make sense, because if you go to Bangkok, Thailand, there's a ton of people there who might be 100% Chinese blood, but they've been in Thailand for 200 years, 300 years, they only speak Thai,
right.
What do they check?
So when for example, Chinese Thai or Chinese Malaysian people or of Chinese descent Malaysians come to America, they might still mark down that they're just Malaysian on the census. They're not going to write down, oh, I am of Chinese blood, but I am Malaysian.
This is actually really complicated because right now, Andrew, Brazil, they do not get classified as Latino because they speak Portuguese. Haitians do not get classified as Latino because they are mostly black looking, right? Middle Eastern people are classified as white, but you could be black. You could be any race theoretically from the Middle East. And then Armenians, because they're Christian, they classify as white, even though they're put under Middle East. So basically, the U.S. Census has a bunch of complexities, right?
It's getting complicated, man.
It's getting complicated. I mean, Andrew, can you imagine there's some 80-year-old white guy who's been working at the U.S. Census? He goes, it was way easier in 1965. Now I'm getting real confused, guys. I'm trying my best, but I'm getting it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the last reason is that a lot of Hmong community leaders feel that Hmong people being classified as East Asian is not going to help the group because it's gonna they're gonna get clumped in with the East Asians that are considered to have higher income and all this stuff, and that's not the experience of the Hmong people. So then they're not gonna get possibly the budgeting help, if there is any of that, for more underrepresented groups.
For sure, it's totally logical, and it's interesting because, man, East Asian has almost become, I almost want to, has it become like an experience identity? Because if you just base things off blood quantum or 23andMe and haplogroups, then different people, like I said, what's a Thai Chinese guy or a Chinese Malaysian gonna get you know what I'm saying? And then like Hmong, they're living in Southeast Asia, living a Southeast Asian American experience. But then if they're like tracing haplogroups back to Northern China 3,000 years ago, then it's like super complicated.
Yeah, and also I do think a lot of people associate the word East Asian with essentially either Chinese or Han Chinese or like Japanese and Korean. So,
but you talking about Valorant, Boba, K-pop.
But actually, it's funny because I don't know if East Asian only means those three countries. You know what
because
I mean?
Mongolian is technically some Mongolians look even more Asian than everybody, to be honest, because they got the Siberian look. But their income stats are not like, not with the Valorant. Like you can't go up to a Mongolian guy and be like, you nerd that plays Valorant and drinks boba. He probably wrestle you.
He'd be like, oh. No, I'm just kidding. That's the Mongolian throat singing. But what I mean is that, like, would Mongolians be Northern Asians then? Because you know how you have South Asians, which are, the brown Indians. And then you have Southeast Asians. And you got North Indians, but you have Eastern Asians.
Listen, man, I got a full breakdown. I'm just pop up the chart right here. This is the confusing thing about Asians, but people also identify like experiences with these different levels. There's Siberian Asians, there's East Asians, there's Thai Kadai, and then there's Austronesian. And interestingly enough, Hmong, to be honest, from what I did in my research, they're like a mixture of all four.
Wow.
That's why it's complicated. But people a lot of people are like two of them. Like we're two of them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
we did a DNA test. We're like 1-2% Hmong.
Yeah,
hey.
we're like 1 or 2% Southeast Asian. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like, I guess. Anyway, let's just take a look at the comments section, Andrew. A lot of people are talking about recent historical context, basically saying like, if most people care about what happened in the last like 100 to 200 to 300 years of the world, shouldn't we go off that versus what happened 3,000 years ago?
Yeah. It makes sense. I mean, listen, I think the last 200 years is more defining of probably your experience and your identity.
You mean of modern global society than 2,000 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the world sort of like took modern shape in the past couple hundred years, right? Of course, somebody said, well, what about Miao people from China? What if they want to identify one way or not? And then somebody else said, dude, this is just America trying to categorize people. Who cares? People should just identify with whatever they identify with.
Right. And then, so most people, I would say the consensus, David, most Hmong Americans that I've seen, most opinions are saying, hey, we are more Southeast Asian. Sure, we have some East Asian bloodlines from way back, but we essentially identify as Southeast Asian, which to me is not weird because I'm Chinese and I know the Chinese diaspora, like there's Chinese Vietnamese people who are either part Chinese and part Vietnamese, or they're ethnically Chinese, but grew up in Vietnam and their parents are from Vietnam, so they identify more as Vietnamese, and that's okay.
Yeah, we have friends that are from the Philippines that are like, they're, I guess, Chinese, or they're like 80% Chinese. They've been there for like 300 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are they? Like,
yeah. But there is the other opinion that people are like, hey, I feel both because my great-grandparents are actually from China, plus Hmong people originated from China, but my parents were from Laos and Thailand. So I guess maybe it depends on how closely you feel to China. But honestly, guys, at the end of the day, in a way, I feel like nationality, the borders cut off more abruptly than even East Asian and Southeast Asian. Because Southeast Asian is not necessarily a country line. I feel like that's more of an identity group versus like China. If you're not from China, you can't say you're Chinese, right? There was something like that. Whatever, you're not from that nation.
People have associated certain like outcomes or like experiences with certain looks.
Right. And then there's also just there's some Hmong people, but not a lot of people who saying like, yo, we're East Asian. Yes, we eat Southeast Asian food and enjoy Southeast Asian music, but a large portion of us still participate in Hmong culture, which is distinctively East Asian. That's a different perspective too.
Right, because some people draw a link between some of the, I guess, the tribal patterns and Mongolian patterns, because it's way from back in the day. I'll say this, man. If you eat papaya salad, that's Southeast Asian to me.
Yeah, dude, if you eat fermented fish sauce and like you make it sweet, like kind of like a Nook Mom vibe, if that's pretty Southeast Asian.
And people deserve to identify. I don't know. It's like I almost said people could identify. I see where the U.S. Census got it wrong, but they needed to give that group more nuance.
No, you know what? I'll say this. Shout out to the U.S. Census for categorizing Hmong people and putting them on the map.
Right. Like even seeing
they
them
needed that
to have a box, right?
Now it's time to make adjustments and just make adjustments, and
if you're just if you're a particularly Mongolian looking Hmong person, do you click East Asian? And then if you are more Southeast,
you mean if you get,
you just go off how you look?
I mean, see, it's funny because some Hmong people's names, the way they're spelled in English is like Chinese, like Yang, which is, but that's just the English spelling.
I know, but I'm saying, isn't it like, let's just take it out of this Hmong East Asian, Southeast Asian debate right now. What about like somebody from the Middle East that happens to look white? Do they click white? Especially if they look white and then they're a Christian Middle Eastern person, but then the second, if they're Muslim, then they click middle.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so much like of this, like, it's so complicated.
No,
nowadays,
I mean,
right?
but that's the same goes to mixed people, like mixed ethnic people. Like, what do they mark down? They can mark down both. All right, so what I'm saying
when
is,
I got to Brazilians, guys, I just threw my whole book in the air and ripped it up.
one of my takeaways is that I think it's interesting that East Asian, into a lot of people's minds, the word East Asian equates Chinese or Japanese or Korean. Now, I think
chopsticks.
Yeah, that East Asian doesn't necessarily mean that, but just identify with what you want at the end of the day. Like, this is not the biggest deal. Like, I'm not saying that Hmong people shouldn't have they should get to choose. So that's why I just let them choose. If 80% of Hmong people feel Southeast Asian, that's how they feel.
But what
in
do you
America.
think about like the U.S. being like, I'm not changing it until 2030, guys?
Right. Well, maybe they already printed the census papers and they're like, guys, it's going to cost about $500,000 more to reprint these things. So we're kind of low on budget because we got all this other money tied up places. Whatever, change it now or later. They should change it. They should change it for the next one if they can't do it this one. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think the Hmong community has spoken, and I think that it's fair. And I also think that at the end of the day, listen, if you're a Hmong person who identifies more as East Asian and you have more ties to East Asia, however you identify with that, cool too. Then you can be East Asian. So be it. But most of the experience here is that people are Southeast Asia and they came from Southeast Asian countries.
For sure. Anyway, guys, let us know what you think in the comments section below. Interesting discussion. Definitely a discussion that is like probably pretty rare to have. Let us know. Until next time, we're the Hot Pot Boys. We out. Peace.
I'm playing some more David Yang bangers.